The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hey, this is Matt Landry, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Clone Wars. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars. This is where the fun begins.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we are looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at SQPN.com/merch. I'm your host, Thomas Salerno, and joining me tonight are Patrick Mason. Hello, Pat.
Howdy, Thomas.
And Jeff Haecker. Hello there, Jeff.
Thomas.
All right, so tonight we are definitely putting the wars in Star Wars because we are going to be covering the military battles of canon Star Wars. And there's oh my God, like I was saying before we hit record, like there's only so much we can do. It is called Star Wars. There's a lot of battles, and we're going to be restricting ourselves to military battles. We've already done an episode on lightsaber duels, so you guys can go check that out if that's a favorite thing, favorite topic for you. But I know definitely you and I, Pat. I'm not so sure about you, Jeff, but I think we're all kind of military history buffs here, right? So
yeah,
this should be an interesting conversation.
We're all men of a certain age.
Yeah.
Men of a certain age find they can't look away from a World War II documentary.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've been watching those since I was like 9. So, I mean, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. Oh, and I mean, Star Wars has so many like World War II references in even the original movie. I mean, I remember watching a documentary about Star Wars where they talked about how Lucas used to watch some of that old like gun camera footage from like World War II aerial dogfights and was inspired by some of that for the original Battle of Yavin X-Wing versus TIE Fighter dogfights in A New Hope. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here a little bit. But what I think I'll actually do to start off with is ask you guys, do you have a favorite battle in Star Wars lore? And this could be canon or legends, just any battle at all.
Oh boy. Okay.
How about you, Jeff?
Oh no. Well, when you said canon, that's one thing, and then you said legends, and that opens up a whole other can of worms. But I mean, I've read all. I think I've read almost all of the Legends books, at least all of the adult novels. There might have been a young adult book or young reader or something here or there I missed. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Just in and of itself. How do you have time for all of this, Jeff? Well, I know you have children. Well, this was in my youth that I read. I read the books.
Okay. Yes.
The Legends books, and there's quite a number of them. It's hard to really narrow down and pick one, but I love any of the Zahn books, and there's some, especially in the original Zahn trilogy, starting with Heir to the Empire and going to The Last Command, which is basically when Thrawn was introduced in any Star Wars. This was in the 90s. And some of the battles in that are just really cool because Thrawn, and I'm so happy we have Thrawn in canon, starting in Rebels, but now in live action as well, because he's a military genius and, strategist, and reading how he's setting up these battles, setting up these encounters because in the Legends books, it's the New Republic by that point as well that he's contending with, because he's coming back from, being kind of away in the unknown regions, and the rest of the Empire has kind of been infighting and fracturing and holding on to small territories, but he's basically coming back to try to unite, the remaining forces into one, one army or one, navy, whatever. And just his strategies to take out the New Republic and like systematically take back systems, key systems and key worlds and stuff that they need is just really cool. So it's hard to pick a specific one just because I don't remember all of them in specifics, but just overall, like anything with Thrawn is a great battle for Legends. And then as far as canon, there are a lot of good ones, as I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think one of my favorites, and surprisingly it's a newer one, is the Battle of Scarif in Rogue One.
Yes.
So I think we'll probably touch more on that one later, but I do really enjoy that battle overall. So yeah, I think for Legends, probably anything with Thrawn, probably like especially the original Thrawn trilogy, and then in canon, probably Scarif is another one of my favorites, but I like a lot of them. So
how about you, Pat?
I think for canon, it's really hard to beat Endor. It's such a good 3-piece battle suite that you get, and it there's other attempts to do it within the Star Wars franchise. I think the most successful copy or image we get is Scarif by far. It's sort of an updated version of Endor. But Endor is, you have your space battle, which is like, bar none, that's what I absolutely love about Star Wars. Like, there's other stuff that I really love about Star Wars. I love the Jedi, I love the Force and the theology and going into the different parts and pieces of the world. But I mean, give me a bunch of spaceships shooting at each other. Like, I can't get enough of that. You have that. You have the ground action, the assault, counter assault, reassault that happens on the moon, and then you have the duel between and the really important battle, which is the duel between Father, Son, and Emperor. And they interplay it very well. It's shot very well. Every piece is important and it matters to the story. And even as somewhat problematic as the Ewoks are, they're still very fun to watch in that scene. Like as problematic as they can be in other scenes, like at least during that scene, it's at least fun. You get a very similar thing with Scarif, where it's a 3-part. You get the space battle, the ground battle, and then the Jyn Erso versus Krennic with Cassian. And it's all done very well, but it's hard to get away from that very first sort of grand, what I would call masterpiece of a battle that we get with Endor. As far as Legends goes, I would have to go with the Battle of Coruscant from the X-Wing series. It's probably, if I was going to pick a battle in Legend, it's probably by far my favorite battle. There is another battle which I liked just on its face because it's a battle between a whole bunch of Imperial factions that occurs fairly late into the series, into the Legends books prior to the Yuuzhan Vong invasion, where Pelion just finally has enough and he just corners everybody and takes over the entirety of the Imperial fleet. Like, it's like, I'm tired of this warlord stuff. This is stupid. And he basically manages to take over the fleets through sheer force of numbers and will, which is a very Imperial tactic.
Oh, sure. Yeah. For me, it's gotta be Hoth, simply because my earliest Star Wars memory is of that battle. I was really too young to know what was going on, but Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back was on the TV, and my mom and I were watching it, and I was very small, maybe about 6 or 7 or something, and like, or maybe even younger. And just that image of the walkers in the snow was burned into my imagination for years before I ever saw anything Star Wars again. After that, it was like years later when I finally saw like the what were they called, the special editions when they were coming out. So like that, just that image, and I gravitated toward the walkers immediately because, you know, I was a huge, you know, dinosaur kid, and they just look like giant metal dinosaurs walking in the snow. So that immediately burned itself into my brain. So for sheer nostalgia and just for the kind of grittiness of it, I love Hoth. Scarif's a really close second, though. I was blown away by that in the movie theater. Like, seeing that on the big screen for the first time was just that. Yeah, I can't even comprehend how, like, almost like a quasi-religious experience it was. It was so like, yeah. And because I actually remember like coming out of the theater and like loudly declaring in the middle of the parking garage that the movie was a 10 out of 10. But no, I love the Battle of Hoth. I love the Battle of Scarif. For me, like Legends, it has to be any of those battles that are depicted in the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars shorts. I love those for how, you know, visually interesting they are. Definitely the ARC Trooper Squad's special ops mission on Munilinst is so great because, you know, he's able to tell that story with almost no dialogue whatsoever and still be like a really like impressive piece of storytelling. But yeah, so that's those are probably mine. And we have a list of key battles here that we'll go through, and we've kind of done them in basically chronological order. But I can't believe, looking at this list, I have forgotten Naboo. I put Naboo. I should have put Naboo on this list because, but why don't we start there? Actually, the Battle of Naboo, it is interesting because, Pat, it kind of has that multiple layers thing going on, right? You have the space battle against the droid control ship. You have the Gungan army against the bulk of the droid forces, and then you have Padme and her squad trying to capture the Viceroy.
Right, and it's almost a 4-set piece.
If you count
right, because you have the Duel of the Fates.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it takes what we had at Endor and it sort of expands it to being a 4-set. And I think it actually does a very good job with that. It does the very same thing Endor did with very good pacing between the various storylines and getting things to match up. I think I don't like it quite as much, simply because, hilariously, the Gungans versus the droids, I actually like that fight.
Yeah, you know what? It's weird slapstick, and it's kind of fun. Yeah. Hisan Dabuma, you know, like, it's great.
Right. Well, just in the tactics involved, it's an interesting set, right? Because they have those shield generators, which kind of enforce close range attack, which is a different, you know, if you can do that to an enemy, it brings about a different sort of combat strategy, right? If you can force them into close combat, then you can make use of like non-range weapons and small range weapons, hand-to-hand combat. And against droids, you think they would do a lot better, but you see, like, once the droids are able to take out the shield generators, the Gungans are kind of out in the open. They're sort of, you know, left to get shot up. And it's interesting to see in battles that happen after that between the droid armies and the clones, the real defense against that problem with the clones is that we just have more clones. Like unlike the Gungans, who, you know, there's a limited number of Gungans. There's a seemingly limitless supply of clones that we can just keep throwing at the robots in a Zap Brannigan style, get the kill bots to shut down when they reach their kill counter. Sort of a thing. But I really like that fight because of the tactic scenarios that go on. What I didn't like about that battle was the space portion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's almost... I feel like we almost don't get enough of the space stuff. We don't really see much of any of the other pilots. It's really only focused on Anakin, and I don't know. I kind of find it funny that he destroys the ship from the inside. Your mileage may vary, but
don't forget I think his name is Rick Olay, the pilot who is on the royal ship. Is he in one of the fighters too in that one?
I think he is.
My boy Rick.
Yeah, and then of course it generated the meme. Let's try spinning. That's a good trick. And
yeah, I mean,
then now this is pod racing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, episode 1 is definitely among my least favorite Star Wars things. Duel of Fates is amazing. It's one of the best Star Wars things, but it's among other things that I don't care for as much. So I don't want to I don't want to hate on it too much because I know people do really enjoy it. But I will say for me, there's been some, but just speaking of Naboo kind of invasion and occupation overall, some of the books that have come out, there's actually a series on Padme, and it was like about her handmaidens, like how there was like a young adult series and these are canon books about the handmaidens, how they set up the handmaidens, how like they are all introduced and have different personalities and functions and things like that. Because you really only get to meet a couple of them in the movies, like really barely just get their name, and that's about it. But these really kind of fleshes them out, and it talks about kind of what it was like on the ground during the occupation of Naboo, like what it was like for the citizens to be, because it was basically the Trade Federation rounded them up, and they were torturing people, and they were trying to starve them out in order to get the Senate and whatnot to relent, or get the Queen to basically give up and sign the trade deal that they wanted. So I don't really like it overall as a battle.
Did they really want it? Because it seems to me that Palpatine should not want that treaty because it would go against his interests. Yet he seems so intent on he's really playing chess against himself in that bit. I'm sorry, Jeff, I interrupted you, but
no,
that bugs me.
Yeah, and like I said,
because it makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm just but just overall, I have come to like some aspects of it and getting to know some others, because you don't really see that in the movie. You just see that there's been there's the invasion, and then the occupation. You barely see that, and then you get the battle. So, I mean, it's okay. The space battle's okay. The ground battle's okay. The Padme action stuff is pretty good, and then of course Duel of Fates is just amazing. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of that really is like the major conflict of that movie. Which is then ratcheted up in the next one. In Attack of the Clones, we have the first battle of Geonosis, which this is probably of the movie battles. The Battle of Geonosis is probably my least favorite because it is such a murky CGI fest that I really can't get invested in anything that's going on. Like, it's just a bunch of CGI robots shooting at a bunch of CGI clones in a murky sandstorm, and to me it's just boring. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I like this one better. I mean, Attack of the Clones, I mean, like, I'm definitely more original trilogy than I am prequel trilogy, but I do like the Attack of the Clones is about half of a good movie. When it's the Obi-Wan stuff, that's good. When it's the any of the stuff on Geonosis, that's pretty good. When it's the Anakin Padme stuff, that's I could skip that. I usually do when I watch the movies, but the battle itself, I mean, it's like you said, it's an okay one, or at least for me, it's an okay one. I mean, I like it okay. It's cool seeing the Jedi like starting to do some things in combat, because of course they're going to become the generals and lead the war basically. So it's cool kind of seeing them in that, because we really haven't seen a big, especially the big, arena battle with all the Jedi, fighting against the droids, because it's, they rounded up whatever Jedi they could to get there. And you think, and still it's not enough, but then the clones come in with Yoda and save the day, and then push the offensive to the Geonosians and the various other separatist people. So overall, I think it's a decent one. But yeah, it's definitely like, it is a CG fest, and yeah, definitely in that it and Battle of Naboo don't all. It really, episode 1, just a lot of the CG just doesn't hold up very well, which when you compare it to something like, the original trilogy, or even like I've been rewatching the Lord of the Rings recently, like, and there is CG in the original, in Lord of the Rings, but like a lot of it is practical and you can really tell the difference. Whereas episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3 was very CG heavy, and episode 3 looks okay, but the others, they've started to look very dated in the last, as technology has progressed. So, yeah, I mean, it's an okay one though overall.
And you get to hear Yoda say awkward dialogue like, "Around the survivors, a perimeter create," or "To the forward command center take me." Was that on anybody's bingo card? That Yoda would be talking, that Yoda, the peaceful Jedi Master, would be talking about being taken to the forward command center. Like, maybe that's a stupid nitpick, but I just, that just always rubbed me the wrong way, or just seemed out of character. I know he's a general now with all the other Jedi, but yeah, that just seemed silly to me. One thing I do like about this battle, though, is the great variety of enemy droids that there are, and all of the new clone vehicles that got introduced, particularly the LAT gunship, which is one of my favorite Star Wars vehicles ever, and the ATTE clone walkers, which is another really cool vehicle, and which the Empire should never have phased out, but they do. Anyway.
Yeah. I probably like this battle more than you guys do, because I give a pass on the CGI stuff simply because the guy was inventing it as he was going. And so,
true enough. Yeah.
Like, it's sort of like I give a pass to Galileo for a lot of the discoveries he made because he invented the telescope. So it's sort of like, if you didn't make those discoveries, I would think a lot less of you. But, it was a different way to do it. You have kind of 4 set pieces. You have the fight in the arena, followed by the bigger fight in the arena, followed by the introduction of the clones against the droids, and then the duel that occurs between Obi-Wan and Anakin and Dooku, and then eventually you have Yoda. And Yoda, you do see a very different side of Yoda through the course of this kind of 20-minute piece here, because you see him leading the clone army, sort of rescuing and saving the day, and then going toe to toe with the droids. And then you also see him in full combat, personal combat, lightsaber mode. Yeah. And that, I think that is a very divisive thing, generally speaking. Some people absolutely love it. Personally, I'm more on that side of it. But I've heard a lot of people have a lot of problems with that as well. So, as far as like how important is this battle, there's a lot of question marks. Even the lightsaber fight wasn't nearly as important as the one from Phantom Menace, or what we get coming up in the next movie. But it's just yes, it's a bunch of CGI armies fighting each other, but that's like every good Marvel movie like these days too. So
yeah,
and I don't go back to those fun. Very often. So
yeah, and I don't complain too much about the CGI. It just, when seeing some of the practical, because then they started in Ahsoka, they did a little bit of showing live action Clone Wars stuff with people, in clone armor, and not just CGI, but you actually see it, and it just looks a lot better. So it's one of those things I imagine, like, what if they had, gotten, full people in full armor and done it practically, it would have been. I mean, it would have looked really cool. But yeah, the saber battle is a decent one, and it really kind of is a first big defeat for Anakin, which is he still doesn't take the lesson of the defeat very. He doesn't really learn anything from it other than, I'm going to get angry and defeat. I'm going to, eventually defeat this guy because I'm angry and all that. Yeah, but
I'll get revenge with my robot hand.
Yeah. But it does lead to him getting the robot hand, which is important in Return of the Jedi, because when he sees, or when Luke sees the robot hand on Vader, he realizes that is his future if he continues to fight to fight Vader. So that's I think a big part of what leads him to throw his saber down and not fight anymore. But yeah, overall it's an okay one. Not one I'd love compared to some of the other ones, but overall it's okay.
And over the course of Clone Wars, we'd revisit Geonosis a couple of more times, right?
Yeah, I can't remember if they go back a third time, but there's the second battle of Geonosis that you see in the Clone Wars show.
Yes. Where they use flamethrowers on the Geonosians, which is pretty intense for a kid show.
Yeah, Clone Wars is very, very mature sometimes for being a kid show.
Was that a war crime? I don't know. It feels like a war crime.
I mean, beings so.
Yeah. Well, and what later happens with Geonosis is, which is in Rebels, you find out it wasn't completely a genocide, but you find out that basically after Clone Wars after the Clone Wars ended, the Empire and the Empire Rises, they go back and they have wiped out Geonosis basically because they were trying to erase any trace of them creating the Death Star or starting to build parts of the Death Star or whatever the plans or whatever they were doing. So
they literally fumigate the planet.
Yeah.
With poison gas.
But there's the one Geonosian who lives and has a queen egg. So, maybe there's hope for the species down the road, but yeah.
Click Clack.
Click Clack.
I think
he's
Click
called. Clack.
Yeah. Yeah. But before we get a little bit deeper into Clone Wars, there is the opening space battle in Revenge of the Sith. So kind of like the canon Battle of Coruscant, which is more CGI, but I think it holds up better because it's in outer space.
Yeah.
And against the backdrop of stars, that always tends to look better. I like this one because of the scale of it. That opening shot where you have the Venator, and then you kind of swoop past it and you get revealed the literally probably thousands or tens of thousands of ships in orbit fighting one another is pretty awesome. And to get to see Anakin and Obi-Wan doing combat in their Jedi starfighters together is pretty cool. And even the whole sort of comical ending of it where they crash Grievous's ship, the Invisible Hand, into the planet, and that's where Obi-Wan says another happy landing, right? Yes, yeah. That was always fun. But yeah, it doesn't take up a whole lot of the movie, but it kind of broke the Star Wars mold kind of to throw such a huge space battle at the beginning of the movie. So in that sense, it's different. So I like it.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I feel like I don't have a ton to say on it compared to some of the other ones, but it is a fun one. Yeah, and space combat is I really love in all the movies, except maybe Episode 1 and Episode 2 didn't really have a space combat scene other than the little kind of ship versus the single ship versus single ship of Jango versus Obi-Wan. And that was a pretty cool.
Get him, Dad.
that part was pretty cool in Episode 2. But right, the Battle of Coruscant in this, and if you kind of headcanon it with what was happening in the micro series Clone Wars with the battle on Clone Wars, which I kind of do. I tend to, unless we get something showing otherwise, I like to consider that a canon, a canon event as the youth might say. And yeah, overall, it's a cool battle. yeah, you really get especially when you get to the duel scene of like you really get to see Palpatine or Sidious kind of. Like Dooku's just realized he's been played for a fool this whole time, because when he realizes that he was never meant to be Palpatine's or Sidious's true apprentice. He was just kind of the placeholder until he could get, and this is kind of one of the final steps before he can get Anakin, but he just needs to get, he just needs to push Anakin further and further. So I like it from that aspect. It has a good development for Anakin, and has, of course, one of my favorite gifts of Star Wars, which is the "Do It" video.
Right, of course.
Yes. Yeah, no, I like this one. Yeah, it's a fun, good space stuff. Good, good lightsaber stuff. I know we're not really talking lightsaber specifically, but yeah, I like this one.
I have difficulty judging this one simply because it was literally the most disappointed I'd ever been in a movie in my entire life.
Oh no!
Because there was so much in my mind, and there was so much hype about the space battle at the beginning and how big it was going to be and how grandiose. And then we spent the entirety of it following two small ships and these stupid buzz droids trying to take their ships apart and blowing up some missiles. And I'm like, there's just so much space battle going on that I'm not seeing. Like, I wanted an Endor style following ships around, watching major action, ship to ship combat stuff, and that's not what I got. I got something different. And so, and it's such a deep disappointment that I can't, even watching it now, like, there's no way I can get to an objective place so that I can judge it on its merits.
I know, I get it. I've been there with certain movie sequences where it's just like I can't, or even entire like episodes or series of things that I can't judge objectively anymore because the disappointment is still raw after like years. So I get it.
Yeah.
So I think
I'll recuse myself from that one.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with that is the sequel or the prequels. They really didn't have, because in the original trilogy you had the trio of Han, Luke, and Leia, and then Chewie and Lando. So you had multiple kind of point of view characters, and then plus some supporting that really were pretty well developed. But in the prequels, you really are your characters are Anakin, Obi-Wan, and then you have the support characters of the Jedi. So you don't really have like a rogue kind of like Han Solo type who's kind of there to like give you an extra point of view. So I think that's part of, like, if there had been a point of view, like there was a military guy that was, one of Anakin's buddies or something, could have been in the battle. That could have been like you follow him a little bit and you follow the others. But yeah, no, I hadn't really thought about that before. But yeah, I mean, I still like it, but yeah, they could have done a lot more with it, I feel like. So.
And we do get like glimpses of, what's that planet called that Grievous was hiding out on?
Utapau.
Utapau, thank you. We get glimpses of it. We see the clones invade. We see the aftermath of it with Order 66 when Obi-Wan's troops and Cody turn on him. But really, there's not that much to say there because we just get glimpses of it. And glimpses of a few of the other battles, too, when there's that Order 66 montage.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, Kashyyyk. I almost forgot.
You get like 5 seconds of Kashyyyk, which is not enough.
No,
Chewie was there.
Chewie was there, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, like we saw some, cool droid and clone vehicles. But again, yeah, there's just... That's the thing. Like, there was almost too much going on in episode 3 that you couldn't really focus on some of this stuff because they really had to tell the story of Anakin's fall to the dark side and the final duel not final duel anymore, but one of his final duels with Obi-Wan.
His first.
So yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts on that, listen to the lightsaber episode.
But yeah, I get moving on to like in sort of chronological order here, Clone Wars itself. we can't talk about Clone Wars without talking about Umbara.
Yeah. And I put this one on the list, so I'll take the lead. But
sure,
this is from the Clone Wars series, the animated series that is canon. I want to say it was season 4, I believe. So well into the Clone Wars, but it was basically the planet Umbara leaves the Republic and is joining the Separatist Alliance, but they're a key planet and have resources, or they're a key trade route or something. I can't remember exactly. But this one's really interesting for development of the clones, because in the Clone Wars, you do get development through the course of the series, and you really get to know certain clones really well. But this one, I think, really kind of sets up the clone rebellion that we see in the Bad Batch, because this is, I think, the first time, because essentially what happens is there's a Jedi General Pong Krell, who's I believe it's a Basilisk, who's the same species as Jester Dex, or whatever his name is, from Attack of the Clones, like the 4-armed alien, except instead of a big beer belly guy, he's a pretty well built Jedi guy, and he's got 2 double lightsabers, which is cool. But Anakin is essentially recalled, and he's assigned to lead the 501st, which is Anakin's like clone division, to retake Umbara. And Krell is known for high casualty rates, and unlike Anakin, doesn't really acknowledge the humanity of the clones, and just kind of treats them like tools and resources to spend in getting your objective. And in this arc, he a lot of things happen, but basically he decides to order the execution of a clone named Fives, who will become important later in Clone Wars if you haven't seen it. But Fives had disobeyed orders to basically try to take out an enemy ship that they had captured, or they captured an enemy ship and he was trying to take out another ship. But because he disobeyed orders, Krell was going to execute him. And along with that, he also leads clones into a battle where what they believe are Umbarans, who are an alien, they're a non-human species, and he basically tricks everybody into thinking that these are Umbarans wearing clone armor. But Rex, who's Anakin's like kind of first command, or his kind of second in command, recognizes that these are actually clones, and basically Rex leads a mutiny against Krell, who eventually reveals that he wants to join the Sith and join Dooku. And yeah, overall it's just such a good arc for the Clone Wars, because and for clones, because it just develops them really into it. Like if you're going to watch the Clone Wars, which I do recommend watching it all, but this is definitely one of the key arcs to watch, because not all of Clone Wars is great, as we were talking beforehand, but this is a really good arc, and you really get development of the clones, and you get their humanity, and they're not just mindless tools like the droids. They're and eventually in Order 66, they'll of course be compelled by the inhibitor chip to take out their Jedi generals. But in this, you actually get to see that they're pushing back, because they recognize, like, even if they're considered property, they still have humanity and have dignity, and they fight for it. And this really sets up what we see in the Bad Batch, with kind of Rex kind of leading a clone rebellion, which I wish we'd kind of seen, and we kind of did see it in the Bad Batch, but I was kind of wishing to see like a full on like clone rebellion against the Empire, like in a big battle or something. But we just saw kind of a little bit of that.
Like in the video game Star Wars Battlefront 2, the original one from 2006. In the story mode, there is a battle where there is a massive clone uprising on Kamino against the Empire that gets crushed by stormtroopers. And that would be just because of sheer numbers. But that would have been like something cool to see in canon, or like horrible to see, but also cool. But but we didn't really get any of that, like you said, Jeff.
Yeah, but this arc is really good, and I think it's really important for setting up kind of where the clones, because the clones are essentially retired at the end of, or in the Bad Batch, they're starting to basically get phased out in favor of stormtroopers, and they're still considered property of the Empire. So like if you disobey your orders against the Empire, as many are starting to question orders, like you're going to get shipped off to various places, and you're going to be sent to guard old armor and stuff like that, like one of the parts of Bad Batch, or you're going to be sent to Mount Tannis to basically become a zombie trooper type of thing, or like have your mind like wiped, and you're essentially just a programmed human droid at this point. So yeah, I really like that story arc in Clone Wars. I don't know if either of y'all are as familiar with it, but I've watched it several times through, and it's really good.
No, I've seen it, but I have not seen it in a while, so I'll definitely have to go back and rewatch that. But yeah, I remember it definitely being impressed by it. Yeah. And I mean, Clone Wars, it's almost like I do appreciate Clone Wars that like they didn't just focus every episode on combat, that there were different kinds of episodes, but there were definitely, like arcs that were combat centric, like Umbara, like Geonosis. And then of course, poor Mandalore, the several sieges and constant, destruction, change of government, various things of Mandalore, which has become, relevant again due to, the Mandalorian and dealing with the after effects of the Empire's final, purge of the planet. But in Clone Wars, we see, first it being attacked by Death Watch under what's his name?
Vizsla, not Paz.
Yeah,
Vizsla.
He's one of the Vizslas, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but yes, one of the Vizslas. It's not right. Paz. Paz is the Vizsla in The Mandalorian.
Paz is the cool one. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that, and then of course, Maul and his group when he takes over.
Well, he takes over Death Watch. Yeah. Yeah, and then
of course later you have the final, siege with Ahsoka leading that detachment of the 501st to take the planet, and that's really cool. And with some Bo-Katan's Mandalorians with her, that's really cool.
Yeah, and I hope we get to see more of, because in Ahsoka there was actually some flashbacks to that, and that kind of led to some rumors of a live action Clone Wars movie being made, and I was like, it's probably not going to happen, but it would be really cool if they did, and this would be a great one to do. But yeah, Mandalore has been, and even in the Legends there's a lot of good material on Mandalore, and a lot of good material related to clones. Like the clones in Legends, a lot of them adopted kind of Mandalore culture, so I love there's some really good they're called the Republic Commando books that are about Mandalorian or clones kind of adopting Mandalorian culture. But yeah, I love the Clone Wars Siege of Mandalore. The siege of, or the Mandalore battle in Rebels is also really good. So you can see that there's kind of been an ongoing fight for 20 or almost 20 years to probably back and forth to kind of, because the Empire is ruling Mandalore, but there's still resistance. And then, of course, by the Mandalorian, you have Bo-Katan basically trying to give up the Darksaber in order to save her people and to save Mandalore, but then it still leads to the Purge, because just Mandalorians just never give up fighting, aside from Bo-Katan. So I hope we get to see, and we did see like kind of a battle in Mandalorian season 3 which was cool, but it would be cool to see like a full scale, like see the Purge of Mandalore, like see a battle kind of in that, because it probably would have more Mandalorians and more ships and more things like that. So I hope that's something they do eventually, or at least like show flashbacks of or something.
I would eventually like to see these wars between the Mandalorians and the Jedi that they've alluded to several times. I mean, and I know they were in Legends, but they've alluded to it in canon as well. And that would be cool to see.
Yeah.
Kind of heading now into the dark times of the Empire. Well, what comes first canonically, actually, Rebels or Andor?
Well, they're kind of taking place at the same time. Like Rebels starts 5 BBY, or before the battle, 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, and then Andor season 1 is 5 years before the Battle of Yavin. So they're kind of like season 1 of Rebels and season 1 of Andor are basically taking place at about the same time. Like probably not like there's probably like, as the season of Rebels progresses, there's probably like a little bit of crossover. And I was kind of hoping there would be like an actual like specific crossover, because at the end of Rebels season 1, you have the call, like a message being transmitted out from Lothal, like a message of hope from the Ghost Crew. And I was hoping we would hear that in Andor, like to sync it up, but didn't quite get there. But
I suppose.
Yeah, that might still happen.
Right. Yeah, but they're kind of like I said, they're both start at the same place, and then Andor's next season will kind of like each chunk of episodes that they're going to do will kind of be a year. So that I do think there will be a crossover episode with Mon Mothma between what happens in Andor and what happens when we see her kind of extraction from Coruscant, and we see the back end of that in Rebels. But I think we'll see her actually getting off Coruscant and escaping the Empire. So, but yeah, they're kind of taking place at the same time.
And there's a couple of clashes in that series in the first season of Andor, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. There's of course is that the name of that? Jeff, how do you pronounce that one planet that Cassian went to?
Aldani.
Where there's the
is it
Aldani? Yes.
Yeah.
Aldani. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So you have right. So in the first, because every arc basically ends with a battle, and so you have, and they ramp up in style and intensity. So in the first one, you have this Battle of Ferrix, which is just a very small, it's basically 3 squads of corporate security versus Andor and
Luthen.
Oh goodness, yeah, Luthen. Whatever his name really is. Luthen. Yeah, Skarsgård. So you have that, and that spills over into basically the entire population kind of subtly helping out Andor and Luthen. And it's very well done. In my opinion, it's sort of what happens when you have a police action versus an unfriendly populace with 2 very skilled insurgents, and just the end of that whole sequence, because it's basically an entire episode, and the end of that whole sequence where the officer is having to be like screamed at by the sergeant, like, we've got to get out of here because of how badly things have gone sideways.
Cyril.
And right. And yeah, Cyril, it's a great character. But that then gets eclipsed by the next battle we have, which is on Aldani, which is effectively what happens when you try and steal the entire payroll of an Imperial sector, and the Imperials find out what's going on. And it's a very small battle. It's against kind of the security forces versus the theft team, but the intensity is sort of ratcheted up, right? It's not a 20-on-2 battle anymore. It's almost a fair fight, and that ends with a little bit of a space portion, with them escaping through the eye, and pretty amazing visual backgrounds. And then the final sort of thruster battle of the whole series, which is on Ferrix, back on Ferrix. And this time it's the whole population versus the Empire, because and it's so fantastic how this gets set up through the course of the show as sort of this background storyline that gets played out through following one of the villains, Daedra, that you have this small little 20-on-2 police action that went terribly wrong that leads to the Empire coming in and setting up shop that leads to this unfriendly population effectively becoming more than unfriendly, becoming hostile, and then it boiling over with all of the main characters. And it's one of those, it's a battle that's done so very well because the focus isn't necessarily the fight. It's all the individual characters who are part of that fight. And that's one of the things Andor does so well, is it's just this amazing cast of characters. And they're all trying to do their own thing with the fight. And the fight itself is this background fight, but it's also the whole dang reason everything's going on. Like,
right, yeah.
Right. Like, this is it. This is why there's a rebellion in the first place.
A pocket of fomenting, as I think it's Linus Sergeant Mosk says there's pockets of fomenting.
Yep.
But it's interesting.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that's like at this time, and of course, I mean, that's the story they're telling, so they could do whatever. But it's interesting that there's like this is happening when in Rebels, in the show Rebels, like the insurgents on Lothal are doing their thing, and it's like people are finally having, like, people have had enough. Like, and I can't remember the character's name, the one in Andor who's like the idealist who writes like the manifesto. But he talks about rebellion is, I think he says something like it's spontaneous, and it's like it's a search for freedom that is from those who are oppressed. So, and of course, what Andor does leads to more oppression, which in turn leads to more rebellion, because they're getting crushed harder, so they're getting desperate, and desperation leads to wider breakout of rebellion.
Well, I mean, Princess Leia says this, right? The more the Empire tightens its grip, the more star systems will slip through its fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of our Rebels crew, that show terminates in the Battle of Lothal with Thrawn against our intrepid team of insurgents.
Yeah, and I mean, Rebels is definitely one of my favorite Star Wars things. Like, even compared to pre-Disney, but I love Rebels so much, and I kind of count the battle as like, because basically in the season 4, they find out that Thrawn is building the TIE Defenders, which are kind of a super advanced TIE fighter with a hyperdrive and shields and all this. And and they're like, if they build if they can get this program started, like the Rebels, there's no hope for what the ships the Rebels have, because the Rebels are still kind of a ragtag crew. And if they can fully build these defenders, so they basically set up they try to set up like an insurgent action where they infiltrate Lothal to get the TIE Defender plans back to the rebellion, which then lets them authorize a strike of the military side of the Rebels to get there, but then they get shot down, and then it's like the ghost crew on the ground is all that they have to try to stop this thing. And it just leads to unfortunately Kanan's demise, but it leads to some really cool stuff with like the World Between Worlds as part of it. You get wolves in the battle, like force wolves that can travel through basically kind of travel through hyperspace kind of on a planet. Like a lot of cool crazy stuff in this show. But then ultimately they do end up stopping the TIE Defenders and also liberating Lothal, because they blow up the ship, or I think it's the fuel depot they blow up, and Thrawn's still there.
That's Governor Price blows it up.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, but it leads to them like,
sir, the fuel, and she just shoots it at it anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And then of course it ends with Thrawn, like his fleet is above the city, and he's just gonna hold them hostage, and then Ezra calls the Purrgil, the space whales that we see in Rebels and Ahsoka, and saves, liberates Lothal, and they which I just, the way for that to end, I was not expecting space whales to. It wasn't on my bingo card for that one, but yeah, I just love the whole final arc of Rebels. So
it redeemed that episode that everyone said was filler and stupid. The space whales episode.
Yeah,
Filoni's like, nope, I'll show you. I'll bring the
Rebels, like even the early episodes, they like are very important. Then come back to be like it's I love that show. I'm rewatching it right now, kind of leading up to Andor. So really love Rebels, and the ending of it is great as well. And there's other smaller battles too, but the kind of Lothal situation is probably the best.
Yeah, and it really I think kind of shows the galaxy that the Empire can be beaten.
Yeah,
because
they don't come back to Lothal. Like Lothal, like it's the Ghost Crew kind of hangs out on Lothal and takes part in other battles, but like they keep Lothal doesn't get recaptured by the Empire in the course of the the war. So
right. I think then we can move on to Scarif, which, as I said, is one of my favorites. What I really like too about this battle is that it seems to have been inspired by like a single line from the crawl of the original Star Wars, the opening crawl, where it says rebel ships striking from their hidden base have won their first victory against the Galactic Empire. Well, I guess now you can sort of count Lothal as like their first victory, but I think they mean like, you know,
as
the Rebel Alliance proper.
Right,
because Lothal was,
because Lothal was just the Ghost Crew mainly, and like was one rebel cell basically in the end.
Right, a local action.
Yeah, versus like the entire. Because I love it. I love this one too because you have Jyn Erso trying to get everybody to commit to this, and everybody's like, well, we have to give up. We have to go our separate ways and hide. But you have I think it's Admiral Radis, the Mon Calamari, who basically just forces the issue because he's got the ships, or at least a lot of the big ships, so he's going for it anyway. So,
and I love those the big Mon Cal cruiser from that battle, which has the really cool keel tower on the bottom, and it also has a hangar bay big enough to house a blockade runner in it, which is pretty cool. There's so much going on in this battle. You know, the space action is really dynamic. I love those almost over the shoulder shots or over the astromech shots that we get of the X-Wings in flight and coming out of hyperspace and stuff. Those are amazing. And I like that you can clearly tell, like in Scarif, what everybody's objectives are. You know, the guys in orbit are trying to destroy that shield generator that is preventing communications out from the planet. Jyn and her strike team are trying to get the Death Star plans that they can beam up to the fleet in orbit. The ground team is trying to buy Jyn time. So you clearly get what everybody's doing. And I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the ground team isn't just trying to buy Jyn time. They're also trying to, they've got to reestablish the link.
Yes,
there's a point at which the link effectively gets broken and they have to repair that. And it sidesteps one of the few issues with the Endor fight, and that is the fleet action doesn't make a whole lot of sense because they're just waiting for the shield to come down so they can go after the Death Star.
Yeah.
So like, you know, and it becomes we'll get close to Star Destroyers because it turns out the Death Star is actually online. Whereas at Scarif, there's none of that. Everybody has something they are trying to do at any given moment, right? There's not a lot of focus on anybody sort of just waiting around to do anything. I do love the fact that you get aerial combat between TIE fighters and X-Wings. And
yes, in atmosphere. Atmosphere.
There's a certain amount of like extra gravitational and atmospheric problems that they do display the fighters having, which is nice to see. It's still a lot of space aerial magic going on there. It doesn't match actual physics, but it's Star Wars. So I love the ramming, the specific ramming ship. As a guy who spent a lot of time doing orbital mechanics stuff and kind of playing with that sort of thing, like I think somebody who knew what they were doing actually put a little bit of thought into that, because the way it hits, it sort of drifts into the Star Destroyer and clutches, and then he turns the engines on to get it to move. That was all done really well. They ionized it beforehand. It's such a fun, but also very realistic battle. And I like the ground portions of it, the back and forth between the folks on the ground, and then the eventual the jig is up, and then kind of getting stormed down. It's unfortunately a very sad battle.
We even Bodhi, who reestablishes the connection, a grenade kills him. We get several other people, just taken out by just waves of stormtroopers. I like, though, when initially, like, Bodhi has the idea of dispersing Imperial resources on the ground by calling in a lot of false reports of rebel action on different landing pads and different islands, which causes the Imperials to disperse their forces to all these places. I like how at one point where they're causing the stormtroopers to retreat, and then you kind of hear the thump, and there's the walkers that show up, and they're like, oh, okay. And like they even have like a small, like man portable rocket launcher that they try using on one of the walkers seems to work, but it doesn't. You know, like you can't take out the entire thing that way. But yeah, there's so many great moments in that. It reminds me a lot of like, a World War II movie, which is one of the reasons why I like Rogue One so much.
Yeah, and there's also some good Rebels callbacks too, because there's the Hammerhead Corvettes that they use. Those were in Rebels. Those were there was a mission.
Those. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's a whole mission that Leia was bringing these to get stolen by the Ghost crew, and then they're of course used in there. And the ghost is at Scarif. Like you don't see it any of the crew, but you can see the ship profile and like the big when they I can't remember if it's when they arrive at Scarif or when they're jumping into hyperspace to go there.
It's twice. You see it on the ground at Yavin 4, and then when they arrive at hyperspace in orbit, you can see it. Okay. And Hera gets name dropped when they're on Scarif.
And I think you see Chopper roll by too, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that one.
Oh,
it's been a little bit. I'm when Andor season 2 is over, I want to like rewatch. I want to watch Andor season 2, then like watch Rogue One and watch New Hope like all right together. But yeah, no, Scarif it's a lot of fun. Like you said, sad. I remember when I saw it with my wife when it came out, and she was like, at the end, she's like, "So they live, right?" And I'm like, "No, like only
not looking like it."
So yeah, but yeah, no, it is a great one, and yeah, the on the ground stuff, like they really set up the characters, like Chirrut Imwe, who's the kind of the blind, almost using the Force guy, and then you have Baze, who has like the big. He has like the big gun that uses these like, I don't know what they are, but it like ejects these canisters after he shoots a certain amount. It's kind of a cool gun. But like they go in knowing they're giving their lives up in order to give this slightest hint of a chance to stop this or to not even stop the Death Star right now, but even just to get the plans to potentially try to stop the Death Star and save the galaxy. Because if this thing goes online and they can't stop it, like because they're already building another one, I think, in this point. Like the Death Star 2 has already been in construction, so
it's already been
So yeah, they're like, if they get if it goes online, there's no weakness, then there's not much you can do. So
and the Empire has been gearing their whole economy towards the building of these two things. Almost every resource they have is being poured into. I mean, like, and to what you mentioned before, Jeff, about like the TIE Defenders, there's that whole wrangle about how like, oh, we can't spare the credits for the TIE Defenders because they got to go towards Stardust. It's like.
And same thing in Bad Batch, when on Tantus, like because Tarkin, of course, is like he wants this Project Necromancer shut down, or like he doesn't see the need for it. And of course, when everything fails at Tantus and they escape, Tarkin says, "All right, we'll just roll all these resources into Project Stardust." So
into Stardust, right? Yeah, like, thanks, Tarkin. But I mean, it's good for the rebels, I suppose, because the Empire kind of put all their eggs in one basket, in a sense. Tarkin's whole dream of having these two battle stations that could essentially, subdue the entire galaxy with just fear of annihilation alone. And I love how the ending of Rogue One, blends almost so seamlessly into A New Hope, which of course has the first and probably one of the most iconic battles that Star Wars has produced, just because it inspired all the others pretty much, and that's the Battle of Yavin. I like both the original version of it and the additions to it that were made in the special edition. I like both. And I like the ticking clock aspect of that battle. How, we're on limited time here. The Death Star is, and to your point earlier, Pat, about orbital mechanics, it actually has to orbit the gas giant Yavin before
Yep.
it can get in range to shoot the moon that they're all on. So that adds that ticking clock element to what that, and the tension of that battle. Like, I almost wish I could go back in time and like have not seen that battle before, because I feel like if you saw that in the theater for the first time without knowing anything about it, you'd be on the edge of your seat, like, oh, are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? You know?
Yeah. Well, and they do that really, like, that's one of the things they did at Scarif that was done so well, is you have the fight between, or basically Jin and Krennic becomes the ticking clock, right? And the funny part is, it's for both of them, right? Because if Krennic doesn't get this under control and get out, he's going down too. And so it's a ticking clock. It turns out to be a ticking clock for both of them. And it's Scarif, I know I'm going backwards here, but Scarif is just, it's almost like it's the reverse of Hoth in a lot of ways. Like, very few of the rebels make it out, but the information they did. And but even that is in jeopardy, right? Because you have a whole nother movie that has to account for that, and that's A New Hope. Yeah, where half of that movie is just trying to get the plans back to the rebels.
Yeah, and I love how the Battle of Yavin kind of establishes a lot of things that we take for granted in Star Wars space combat. The sort of, squadrons based around, fighter types. You have Red Squadron for the X-Wings. You have Gold Squadron for the Y-Wings. You have that both those fighters do different jobs in the Fleet Air Arm. And so, are sort of given their own roles, where the X-Wing is an all-around space superiority fighter whose job is to really take out other fighters. And the Y-Wings are fighter bombers or light torpedo bombers. So really, it was supposed to be the Y-Wings that would take the shot at the exhaust port of the Death Star with their torpedoes, and the X-Wings were supposed to be providing fighter cover from the inevitable TIE fighters that would come up to challenge them. But things go sideways really quick, and the Y-Wings, being so slow, are easy prey for even a small amount of TIE fighters. Like, I can't imagine how many TIE fighters are actually in the Death Star, and they only loose like a few of them to go after, these two squadrons of rebel fighters. They take out pretty much all the Y-Wings and then start picking off the X-Wings that are left. They're really lucky that the X-Wings can also shoot torpedoes. And so that Luke takes the final shot that, helped, of course, with an assist by Han Solo, who knocks out Darth Vader's his TIE X-1, which is kind of like a lesser defender, I guess. It also has shields and hyperdrive, but it's not as well armed as the defender. But still, yeah, it's a really tense, nail biting space battle, and you can definitely see the influence of a lot of that World War II gun camera footage that Lucas studied before he storyboarded this battle.
Yeah, and I'm more of a fan of the original cuts of the movies than the special editions, but I do like that they gave Biggs a little bit of a backstory, because you don't see Biggs's. I'm pretty sure in the original version you don't see, like, because in the special editions there's a scene of Biggs meeting Luke again, because they were friends on Tatooine, and there's a whole scene that was never part of the movies, but that was filmed, and you can find it. And it might even be on like the Disney Plus stuff now, where you can see deleted scenes. But there was a whole plot of Luke wanting to, where he goes to Tashi Station to get the power converters and meet some of his friends, including Biggs. And Biggs tells him like he's leaving to join the rebellion, because they were friends growing up. But in the special editions, at least, you get to his little backstory of Biggs telling Red Leader, I forget the Red Leader's name, but saying, he's the best bush pilot I know, or whatever. So you get a little bit of backstory for Biggs, which gives it a little bit more stakes when unfortunately Biggs passes away. So in the battle.
Yeah, I think, if you watch the original, it is shot very much like a an early World War II sort of fighter movie.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot, the gun camera footage and that kind of stuff. And it's shot that way, primarily because the practical effects were very difficult to do.
They spent a long time on this. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing the amount of time you could spend on what ends up being mere seconds worth of film. And so you can only shoot so many of these passes, so many of these explosions, so many of these shots. Whereas if you can do it against a green screen, and what we get in the special edition, where you get the full-fledged looking at the ship almost from 360-degree views, doing different stuff, and what we get, proceeding that down the line in movies since then, it makes the space battles like bigger and grander and whatnot. But it is in a lot of ways, I find it fun going and watching kind of the original and how they did it, and that's almost all practical.
And like you say with the CGI, Pat, Lucas was and his team at ILM were inventing this stuff.
Yeah,
like the practical, the sort of model effects they were doing were revolutionary.
Right. And it's crazy to see like the model making they were doing, the visual effects they were doing with the model making, with the green screens, at that kind of technology they had at the time, how they were blending things together, and then watching it do it all again for episodes 1 through 3, where they, if you just look at the camera rigs for the sort of, I don't know if they were calling them high definition cameras at that point, but the camera rigs they were using were these huge sort of monstrous things in episode 1, and by the end of like episode 2 they've panned it down to like something a person could hold. And then it's very interesting watching the technology work as they created. And yeah, like a lot of it doesn't hold up great when you go back and you compare it to other stuff. It's sort of like watching the original Ghostbusters and the dog animations, and you're kind of like, yeah, those are kind of cheesy looking now, but it's, when you're watching and that all that went into them getting those shots, I think it brings a lot to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love how Empire Strikes Back really ups the ante, like in terms of it feels so much bigger than the first movie. And the first movie, feels big on its own terms, but we get this kind of upping of the stakes. We start out with our heroes suffering what seems like a major defeat at Hoth. And there's a great video, and I believe the Star Wars YouTuber E.C. Henry put it out, where he basically compares the Battle of Hoth with the real life Battle of Dunkirk in World War II. And it actually is surprising how similar these two battles are, where it was both in Dunkirk, you have the British Expeditionary Force, trapped on the beaches in France, and the German army is closing in. But with the help of the fleet of civilian vessels and also warships, the British are able to evacuate most of their soldiers off back to Great Britain, but they had to leave behind a lot of their heavy equipment and stuff. But the Germans do not, they don't get there in time enough to capture the British Expeditionary Force or destroy it, which basically would have won Hitler the war. And it's very similar in this case, where you have the Empire finds the primary rebel base on Hoth. If they can destroy it and capture the rebel leadership, well, then that's it, right? Well, the rebels the Empire essentially achieves none of its strategic goals at Hoth. They capture the base and a lot of equipment, but most of the rebel troops are able to escape through the Imperial blockade, and their leaders, like Princess Leia and the others, they are gone. So the Empire really wins kind of a Pyrrhic victory at Hoth. They drive the rebels off the planet, but they don't crush the rebellion. And of course, it is interesting to see how I think one of the reasons they sort of botch this operation is because of the incompetence of Admiral Ozzel, who gets
Poor
Ozzel, who gets executed in the field by Vader, and Captain Piet gets a battlefield promotion to Admiral in his place.
In the span of a sentence.
Yeah.
Calls him Captain Piet at the beginning of that sentence and Admiral by the end of it.
Yeah, it's not. You don't want to be one of the high ups in the Imperial Navy, because if you run across Vader, there's a chance your promotion will get cut short.
Right, yeah, and then because Ozzel like botches it up from the very beginning, because like he brings
too close to the system.
Right, he brings the task force within range of rebel sensors. So now there is no, like, you know, but the rebels kind of already knew they were coming because of the probe droid they destroyed. But now it's like, you know, they know the fleet is here, you know, so they can begin evacuation operations. And I love how, though, the Imperials must not have known about this, but the rebels have that ion cannon on the surface, which they can use to poke holes in the Imperial blockade to get their ships through. We have that one thing where those two transports escape, and what is it? That one Imperial guy's like, our first catch of the day, right?
Yeah, like you've ever been fishing.
And they're able to escape. I love that briefing that Leia gives the X-wing pilots and the and Rogue Squadron. That was pretty cool to kind of see Leia in command. That was, and of course the battle between the walkers and the snow speeders is just iconic. There's really nothing I could say about it that would express how much that was burned into my brain. But yeah, I love the idea of, you know, them. And all they need to do is buy time for the evacuation to happen. They're not meant to, but they destroy quite a few walkers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, and it's interesting because they don't have the kind of armament you'd need to take the walkers down because they're heavy armor. They have to do it by this really roundabout tow cable, wrap them up and bring them down that gets figured out while they're out there in the field.
Right.
And it's such a fantastic battle from a cinematography perspective because, you know, it's done in very much the style of sort of a World War I, trench warfare, sort of getting invaded kind of a thing. But you have
the trenches. Yeah.
Right. You have this aerial battle that's going on at the same time as the ground battle, but it's sort of an intermix because the planes are fighting the tanks effectively.
Yeah. And if you look at the AT-AT walkers, their body section actually looks like the World War I German A7 tank vehicle. So there's like a visual cue there.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, well, Veers' helmet, like if that's not a World War II or World War I reference.
Yeah.
But it's all shot on a white background, which is the crazy part because you've never seen, you know, this was green screening at an early phase where nobody was brave enough to do a green screen shot on something that wasn't a very dark background. Like, so they had done a lot of that for the, you know, A New Hope, and where you had stars and space as the background, but here you were doing like white snow and mountains and blue sky and very bright colors, and they pulled it off in a way that's you can tell if you look really closely, there are problems with it, but for the most part, you don't care. Like you're wrapped up in the action, and you get involved with Luke, with his sort of individual fight against that one AT-AT where he throws the bomb inside and rolls away, and then, you know,
and
gets out and
his
gets away.
hapless co-pilot Dak.
Poor Dak.
Yeah, poor Dak. And it's one of those. It's yet another airplane design where I'm like, really, you needed a separate guy for that? Like, why? Like, but whatever.
Right. It's actually like I heard, like in lore, it's supposed to be like a civilian airspeeder that they have jerry-rigged.
Yeah.
They've basically bolted those two blaster cannons onto it.
Well, because
they're using it for something it was never meant to be used for.
Yeah, because in Kenobi, in the series Kenobi, they use these for the first time when they're saving Obi-Wan and Leia from the Fortress Inquisitorius. They use these speeders, and that's how they save them, or like that's how they buy enough time to get. I think they bring in the ship, but the speeders kind of clear the way. Because I mean, in Kenobi, there's no like Rebel fleet or anything yet. Like it's still very early on, so there's really this cell, for lack of, it's not really a Rebel cell. It's more they're trying to save kids from force sensitive kids, but this is what they have. And then so it's kind of like they drop these little hints that in the content that they've done since then that is then paid off, that like they then retroactively pay off in the movies. Like you see these speeders getting developed, and like in Rebels you see the Y-Wing squadron getting taken from the scrapyard to be brought to the Rebels, and which are then used in the movies. So, or
the B-Wing being developed for the first time. Yeah. But yeah, and any more on Hoth though, by the way? I just think it's fantastic all around, and just I don't know. It's just one of those. Again, for me, it's the nostalgia plus, just as you mentioned, Pat, like the bold choice of setting it during the day, where
during the day on snow.
Yeah,
you can't get more bold than that.
But yeah, Pat, if you like, you could take the lead on Endor, since I'm sure you have a lot to say about it.
Yeah. Well, Endor is the culmination battle of the show, effectively, right? And it's the culmination battle of the 3 episodes that were originally produced, 4, 5, and 6. It turns out to be also the culmination battle of the first 6 episodes that Lucasfilm made, and it represents the sort of both the Vader redemption arc, Anakin Skywalker redemption arc, as well as Luke sort of coming into his own arc, all tied up with the rebellion's defeat of the Empire, and there's a lot of stuff that's been made since then that sort of spirals that into less meaningfulness. But at the time, it was sort of this: you could defeat the overlord, overwhelming presence, the evil Empire, the space Nazis, whatever they were at the time, and it brings it about in this sort of 3-part, really well done series or intermeshed battles. So you have the space battle, which frankly is still my favorite space battle of all time. The ships employed in this, first and foremost, Star Destroyers have always been cool. From shot one, when you see the Tanaflor, fly by, and then Vader's Star Destroyer, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but
the Devastator
flies over, the Devastator, and immediately, like this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and from that point on, Star Destroyers are just cool looking, even the Executor. Which also shows up in this battle.
Yes.
But you get all the Rebel ships. You get the Nebulan B frigates. You get the Mon Calamari cruisers. You get the corvettes. You get all of the various snub fighters. You get the A-wing introduced in this one, which is a really cool sort of Rebel fighter. And does the B-wing?
Yeah. The B-wing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And the B-wing.
They don't
so
do
you
their
get
cool
these
laser thing, but because they haven't invented that yet. But
yeah. So you get all that introduced. You get, I want to say the TIE Advanced for the Empire gets introduced.
The Interceptor.
Is it the Interceptor?
Yeah,
okay,
the
the Interceptor at that point. That's right. And so the space battle, and it's phenomenal the way they follow different pilots and squads. You're jumping around, you're watching different things get attacked, shields get blown up, ships get blown up, and then eventually the Death Star comes into play. And just that first, what was that?
Right, yeah. Blast came from the Death Star,
things operational.
So that gets done really well. Sorry.
Yeah. It's like...
The ground battle is it's awesome, but also hilariously so. You can tell it's still kind of a kid's show because of the Ewoks. But you have this, hey, we're gonna win the day and take out this shield, and all of a sudden, no, we've been betrayed, and then there's another reversal after that, sort of the insurgents on the inside, and you have this sort of forcing the Empire into this two-pronged fight where, individual action becomes very important because everybody's too busy in the middle of a jungle battle.
Right.
And then watching the Ewoks take out ATSTs in a variety of hilarious ways.
Yes. Setting up this obstacle force of terror for any Imperial soldiers in there.
Well, I mean, originally they were, from my understanding, they were supposed to it was supposed to be on Kashyyyk and be Wookiees, but that was too expensive to make, all the Wookiee suits. They did the Ewoks instead. So,
I mean, it was supposed to be Wookiees back to the very early drafts that Lucas wrote of the story treatments. So yeah. And I mean, he was able to work it into the prequels, I guess. But yeah.
But, and I think my favorite ATST getting downed is when they roll the logs underneath its legs and it can't stabilize itself.
Oh yeah,
so it just
the gyroscope gets screwed up and it falls over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it's funny.
And
sorry, I was just going to say it's funny that just to go back to Rebels, there's an episode of Rebels where there's a clone walker taking on two AT-AT walkers, and you see that there are weaknesses to the AT-AT that were not as much of a weakness in the clone walker, and these are later corrected in the sequels with I don't think you see them in Last Jedi, but there was a new type of it's the next version of the ATST that has multiple legs that keep it from or it has a way to keep it from falling or whatever, and doesn't have the spindly the weakness that these do, and being able to just trip and fall.
Yeah. And this all gets paired with the lightsaber duel, which we covered that pretty heavily in the lightsaber duel episode.
Does anyone else remember when the ATSTs in sort of ancillary material used to be called chicken walkers?
Yes.
Yeah. Nobody calls them that anymore.
I call them that, but I get corrected, and I'm just like, you guys don't know. You weren't there.
Yeah, it is a really fun battle. I enjoy of the original trilogy movies. It definitely is the most intense of the space battles. I like the Ewoks. I mean, I know it seems preposterous that these things should help defeat the Empire, but I don't know. I'm of the camp that the Ewoks are kind of terrifying if you really think about it. They eat people.
Right. Yeah.
They're shown as these friendly teddy bears, but they're they're kind of a dark side. So
they're using those guys' heads as drums.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
I'm rather embarrassed, General Solo. You are to be the main course. And it's oh yeah, okay, great. They don't even think twice about cooking people to eat. So other sapient beings. So yeah, I feel and there's a great it's out of print now, but there's a book. I think I have it on my bookshelf, but I think it's called the Illustrated Star Wars Universe. And in it, there are in-universe documents describing various planets. And one of them is the forest moon of Endor. And the in-universe document that's done for that chapter is a field scout, Imperial scout report of Endor, that moon, of their initial scouting mission. And basically, the poor Imperial scout who's drafted the report basically says, I know no one's going to read this. I know you're not going to listen to me, but do not set up the shield generator base on this planet. It is totally unsuited for this. The natives are hostile. The terrain is terrible. But what am I even saying this for? I know you're not going to read this. And I just think I still kind of view that as canon, that like it got lost in the bureaucracy, or just nobody cared to listen because the decision had already been made. But
yeah, I remember that.
Oh, you also read that book. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I want to say there's one in there about Hoth and
yes,
and several of the planets. Yeah,
there is. Yeah, yep. Such a great book, and it's graced with a lot of Ralph McQuarrie's concept art.
Yep,
and you can definitely see a lot of how Lothal developed from a lot of his early concept sketches of the architecture and stuff. But I'm getting away. I'm getting away from our topic here, and we only have a little bit of time left. I just want to mention how I really think the sequels have a dearth of cool battles. You know?
Yeah.
None of them are as memorable or stick out to me as just like, yeah, that was great. You know?
Like the only really good one is in Force Awakens when they're at the Battle of Starkiller Base. That's really the only good space battle. Last Jedi has a little bit, and I like the scene in Last Jedi when Admiral Holdo, and I mean I like the beginning space battle when they like blow up the First Order dreadnought or whatever, but it's quite a loss for the Resistance there. And I do like the scene where Holdo like turns her ship and basically crashes it at light speed into the First Order ships. That is really cool. But yeah, there's just none of them are as like feel like they have. And I mean, Rise of Skywalker has that battle for whatever that's worth. The movie I've probably seen the least amount of times among all the Star Wars movies. Yeah,
don't get me started on the slow speed chase in The Last Jedi. I
do.
I mean, so many problems with that.
Yeah, but I would want to mention just the Battle of Jakku, which we don't see. It's not on screen yet. It's something they could do later, but it's basically it's the last battle of when the rebellion defeated the Empire over Jakku, which is we see the aftermath of that in the crash Star Destroyer and the crash X-wing or whatever else we see there in Force Awakens. And this battle takes place in the Aftermath trilogy of books that have came out. I think the first one came out before Force Awakens, if I'm not mistaken, and they came out during the rest of the sequels. And then there's been other books since that kind of cover them too. But it is a really cool battle to read about, and it would be something really cool to see on screen. But it basically is because I mean the rebellion has been, or the Rebel Alliance, now the New Republic has been chasing down the remaining forces of the Empire and basically have cornered them to Jakku, because there's also some stuff with the Empire trying to set up what will become the First Order and the Final Order, or the Sith Eternal, whatever you want to say. There is some stuff leading them to Jakku to set that up, but it is a pretty cool battle to read about. And I mean it's because Hera is there, because she's a general in the Republic now, and you get to know a lot of the other characters in this trilogy of books, and some of the other books too, like Snap Wexley, who's his mom Nora Wexley was at Endor, and then you see Snap Wexley in the sequel trilogy. He's if I'm remembering correctly, they're all at the Battle of Jakku, and it just kind of culminates this era of Star Wars. And really, I know it's the canon era, which is different, but it is a really cool battle to read about. So I do, and I would recommend reading the Aftermath books if you want more kind of information about what happened after the Return of the Jedi leading to the sequels. I don't know if either of y'all have read Aftermath or the other books.
I read the first one.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can also you can see a bit of the Battle of Jakku, and I think it's one of the newer Battlefront games.
Yeah, I think
the ones
so.
that EA have put out. There's a mission that takes place during the battle, right?
Yeah, I think part of it is you see the Star Destroyer crash, the one that you see, the one that Rey is trying to search for scrap on. You actually see that Star Destroyer crash on in that game. I've not played it, but from what I've seen about it, I think that's what it is.
Yeah. I've definitely seen the cutscenes from it. Yeah, I do wish we've seen more of that battle sort of realized on screen. And in terms of what I'm hoping for the future for Star Wars military battles, now that Thrawn is back in play in the main galaxy, I'm definitely hoping that we get to see his tactics and strategy put to good effect for the Imperial Remnant in hopefully a future season of Ahsoka or whatever else they're planning to use him in. So, do you guys have any wants, requests of Disney for a future space battle or planet-side battle content?
I mean, I'm excited to see because I think Ahsoka, after Andor, of course, I think Ahsoka season 2 is the next, or no, that's Mandalorian. It's the Mandalorian movie. But then I think Ahsoka season 2 is next, at least as far as live action goes. And then supposedly the Dave Filoni kind of wrap-up movie that could get turned into a series. I think it'll happen in some form, whether it's a movie or a series, just depending on, I think it depends how Mandalorian Grogu does at the box office. But I mean, I just want to see like a big kind of final Mandalorian battle of like, and kind of a big culmination fighting against Thrawn, this villain that I've really enjoyed as a character since I read the books many decades ago now, or a couple decades ago now. So it will be cool to see Thrawn, and I hope we get to see some TIE defenders. I hope like we see at least one kind of like, he rebuilt the defender program or something, or started the program again, and we get to see that. Or
said Paleon doing it, because Paleon's been his like spokesman within the Moff Council.
Yeah, that's true. And it will. Hopefully, we just see like some. I hope they don't. I know part of the problem is if they go to a series, like you have less money to make these big battles, and they could feel a lot smaller scale than I feel like a big kind of final wrap up to the Mandoverse needs to be. So I'm hoping that the movie does happen and it gets like the scale that it deserves, because I think it would be really cool to see Thrawn, commanding a fleet against the Republic's kind of limited fleet at this point, and then you have to get like the Mandalorians to kind of fill in the forces, because the Republic just doesn't have as much of a military left anymore, because you learn about this in the Aftermath books and beyond, but they like demilitarize quite a bit, which is starting to talk about in Ahsoka. Like they say they're trying to demilitarize and things like that. So it'll be, and I hope we saw E-Wings in Ahsoka, but E-Wings were a cool ship from the Legends.
Yes.
So.
Oh my gosh. I wish that they had been more of a cameo. Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully they will be in the future, because that was kind of like the next gen fighter that the Republic was developing after the X-Wing. But then of course I guess they went back to the X-Wing by the time of the sequels. So
it seems that at about the same time as the E-Wing, they were developing the T-70 kind of concurrently. So I think they were experimenting with what the next generation fighter was going to be, but that the E-Wing ended up kind of being not so much a dead end, but like they decided to just stay conservative and go with
and maybe we could see like the E-Wings were all destroyed in this kind of war with Thrawn, and then like they're like, well, that didn't really work, but X-Wings worked before, so let's do those again.
Yeah. Which reminds me, like, if we haven't done it yet, we really need to talk about on this show about like starfighters and starship design and all that stuff, because I love that. I love that topic. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think giant Sith versus Jedi battle.
Sith
Old Republic.
Yeah.
Anything Old Republic. Yeah. Please.
Well done, Old Republic.
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
Well done, Old Republic. Okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And if there's those great CGI videos that the Star Wars: The Old Republic multiplayer game put out a few years back, which shows some of those armies of Jedi versus armies of Sith engagements, and they were really cool to watch. But I'm hoping we see that in live action someday. Yeah. All right, so that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Star Wars. We'd like to take a moment to thank our great patrons, including Joel H., Jonathan B., Deborah F., Dave G., and Leslie H. Their generous donations help us to create The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And now we'd like to hear from you, our listeners. What are your favorite Star Wars battles? You can let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com. You can contact us on our social media pages, or leave a comment on our channel on the StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Thomas.
And Pat Mason, thank you as well.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And once again, I'm Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Let's Science. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science.